music. It's always great to meditate and reflect with some great music, and that was some good selections this morning. So thank you. So, gang, let's get started here. A lot to cover with a short amount of time to do that. So, several things here I want to cover, but I guess the first thing I want to just simply say is this. You hear me talk and George talk and others, leadership within the organization talk about leadership. The first thing I want us to just recognize within the context of this conversation is that we are all leaders, that as real estate agents, that's what you are as a leader. And as a leader, one of the things that we need to recognize is that the better we are as a leader, the more followers we'll have. So I just want you to think about that for a second. I want you to think about the amount of business that you are currently doing. I firmly believe that the amount of business that you are doing is a direct reflection of the quality of leader you are being. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't be a better leader, right? But the fact is, if you take a look at your production, it is a direct reflection of your level of leadership. And here's what I mean by that, because in its truest sense, leadership is really just taking someone to the next level along their personal journey in life and trying to accomplish a higher level of success in whatever it is that they're looking to achieve a higher level of success. And in the case of you as a leader in real estate, you're helping people to get to the next level in life relative to the place where they live, their home, one of the most important things. And so I just want you to recognize that when you have a lot of followers, or specifically a lot of clients, it's a very direct reflection of how good you are at leading people. John C. Maxwell has said in several of his presentations that someone who says that they are a leader but has no followers is somebody who's just simply going out for a walk, right? You're saying, hey, come with me, follow me, and they look behind them and there's nobody following them. You know, they say they're a leader, but nobody's following them. They're not a leader. Leaders have people who follow them. And so again, a very direct reflection of how great we are as a leader is the number of people who follow us in that journey to get people to the next level. And as a real estate agent, that's your job. You do that every single day in asking buyers and sellers to follow you. So I just want you to think about that as we have this conversation today. It's within that context of you are a leader. Let me share this story with you because it's one of my favorite stories because it has to do with this concept of how do we become a better leader? What are the keys to great leadership? And it also is a great story because it involves one of my kids, my daughter, Caroline, who by her own admission is an introvert, and it mortifies her to see her dad going out and talking to people and what she thinks making a fool of himself. So she and I were in New York, and this has been, my heavens, let's see, she's 18 now. She was 13, so it's 5 years ago. Caroline and I were in New York City, and it was her first time. One of the things that I do with all of my kids is when they turn 13, I take them to New York. I did that with Gabrielle, the oldest. I did that with Caroline. It was Jack's turn this year, but because of COVID, we weren't able to do it. The trip got canceled, but we'll do it next year. But on this particular trip with Caroline, we were over by what's called Battery Park, which is close to Ground Zero, where the Twin Towers fell. And in Battery Park, right there, you'll find a lot of salespeople who are selling tours. And one in particular are the water taxi tours. And Caroline and I had decided that that's what we were going to do. And so Caroline and I are walking towards Battery Park, and there are a lot of people milling around. And you'll notice the water taxi salespeople by the lanyards that they're wearing, and the little it's a little placard that signifies that they are legitimate. They're authorized to be there to take people's money, to then print out a ticket and get them on their way to ride the taxi, so they can see New York City from a different perspective, from the water looking at the city. It's a beautiful experience. If you haven't done it, next time you go to New York, try it. But Caroline and I are walking towards Battery Park, and we notice this young man, and he's moving towards us very quickly. And keep in mind, these folks, these salespeople, are paid by, I think, on an hourly basis, probably minimum wage, but also then they get so much for each ticket they sell. They want to be incentivized by their employer to sell more tickets. And so this young man is making a beeline towards us. You know, we made eye contact. He approaches us and he says, are you guys looking to ride the water taxi? And I said, yes, that's exactly what we're here to do. He said, great, well, I can help you with that. And I said, good. And so he said, is this your first time to New York? I said, no, it's her first time, but I've been here several times. I asked him, I said, so I see your name's Anthony. I said, Anthony, how long have you been doing this? He said, I've been doing it a couple of months. I said, that's great. I said, what were you doing before this? And he said, well, this is my first job. I said, really? It's your first job? I said, well, how old are you? He said, 22. I said, you're 22. He said, yeah. I said, man, you've got some pretty lenient parents. You're 22 and this is your first job. He said, you know, I've had my kids working before they even left junior high. And he said, yeah, I'm fortunate. I said, well, do you have siblings? And he said, yeah, I've got a younger brother and a younger sister. I said, oh, that's cool. Good for you. I said, so where did you grow up? He said, well, I grew up across the bridge in Brooklyn. I said, you did? So you're a true New Yorker? And he said, yes, sir, I am. And we got to talking a bit more. We had, you know, the common conversations, asking more about his family and so forth. And I looked at him, we were having some fun. And I said, so, you know, you're pretty tall, look pretty athletic. I said, are you good at basketball? Do you play basketball? He said, oh yeah, I love basketball. I said, really? I said, well, do you think you could beat me? And he kind of took a step back and he looked me up and down and he said, yeah, I could beat you. And we bantered back and forth about that. And that whole conversation probably took about 3 minutes, something like that, as he was doing the paperwork. He prints out the ticket and he goes to hand me the ticket that we'll need to get on the boat at the dock. And as he's starting to hand it to me, he looks at me and says, you know what? Let me just take you over there. Now, let me just give you some perspective. Where we were in Battery Park and where we needed to get to the dock was probably about a 7 to 8 minute walk, something like that. We were far enough away that it was going to be a good little walk. Anthony had committed to taking us over there. So Anthony's leading the way. Now he's moving pretty quickly because he's getting paid by each ticket that he sells, not just hourly, right? He's making most of his money for every ticket that he sells, he gets that bonus. So he's moving pretty quickly. And I'm trying to keep up with him, and I'm not a fast walker. But I look to my side and Caroline is not there. I look behind me and Caroline's probably, I don't know, 6 to 8 paces behind me. And I said, Caroline, come on, catch up with me. Let's go. We got to catch up with Anthony. And he's not too far ahead, but you know, he's probably 5 or 6 paces ahead of me. Well, Caroline finally gets up to me and we're not up to Anthony yet. And I can see this look on Caroline's face. She's not happy. And I'm thinking, why is she not happy? I mean, here we are in New York. We're about to get on a water taxi, something she's never been on before, to take a look at one of the most beautiful cityscapes, you know, skylines that you could see anywhere in the entire world. And, you know, not a care in the world. We're on vacation. What's going on? I look at her. I said, Caroline, what's the matter? And she looks at me and she's like, she's fishing for her words. And then she gets this really concerned look on her face. And she looks me directly in the eyes and she said, you manipulate people. And she said it just like that. I mean, with this irritation and this anger. And it just like, she blurted it out, like it popped out of her mouth without any control. It's like she didn't want it to come out, but it came out. And I looked at her and I said, what do you mean? And she said, you manipulate people. And she said, Anthony. And I said, what do you mean, Anthony? And she said, you got him, you were talking to him, having that conversation with him just so he would take us over to the dock, to the water taxi. She said, that was the only reason you did that. And I said, what are you talking about? I said, what do you mean? She said, well, you had that conversation with him and here he is walking us over there and he's taking his time to do this. And she was really irritated that he was taking his time to do this because she knew he got paid, you know, by each ticket that he sold. And it made her angry that he was doing that, I guess for me or for us. And, you know, it was costing him money. And I said, really, Caroline, is that what you think? It was a great conversation. I mean, she was irritated, but I was having fun with it. I said, really? I said, let's stop for just a second and think about this. Now we continue to walk, but I said, let's just stop in your mind and just think about this for a second. I said, here's Anthony. He's decided to take time out of his work schedule, right, to take us over to the boat, something that he doesn't have to do. Why would he do that? She said, I don't know. I said, well, let me ask you a question. I said, what do we know about Anthony? And she said, well, he's from Brooklyn. He grew up here. He's got a brother and a sister. He's the oldest. This is his first job. And she said, and he can beat you at basketball. And I said, well, all of that's true except for the last one. I said, he cannot beat me at basketball. And when she said he can beat you at basketball, she said that with all seriousness. So she had been paying attention to the conversation, right? She heard everything. And I said, well, now here's an interesting question for you. I said, what does Anthony know about us? She paused for a second and she said, well, really nothing. I guess it's my first time here. And she said, that's it. I said, well, the other thing is that he should know that I can beat him at basketball. And I laughed. And she said, yeah, he doesn't really know anything about us. And I said, isn't that interesting? I said, there's nothing wrong with that. I said, but here's why Anthony is taking us to the boat. I said, because we asked Anthony a lot of questions and we gave him an opportunity to really share his story, to express a little bit about who he is. And when we gave him that opportunity, we did something for him that's very important. In fact, guys and gals, here's one of the things that I would suggest that you write down. The number one human need, aside from oxygen and food, basic sustenance, is recognition. And that's what we did very well for Anthony in those 2 to 3 minutes as we were having that conversation, is that we recognized him very well by asking questions about him, where he was from and whether he had brothers or sisters, and if how long he'd been doing this job and what jobs he'd had before, and if he played basketball and whether he could beat me or not. I mean, we had a conversation and it gave him an opportunity to express himself. And as a result, Anthony was feeling very comfortable. In fact, he was feeling recognized. And because he felt recognized, he was willing to do for us what I know he doesn't do for all of his customers. It's very unusual that a salesman in that position would take the time to walk another 7 or 8 minutes with the client for a customer or client and miss out on 2 or 3 sales, because it truly cost him something. But he felt in his own mind that it was worth it because he was feeling good about himself. And I said that to Caroline. I said, how do you think Anthony feels right now? Do you think he feels taken advantage of? And she looked at me, she said, no. And I said, how do you think he feels? And she said, I guess he feels pretty good. And I said, yes, that's exactly the point. He felt so good about our interaction with him that he decided to take his level of customer service up to the next level, to the point that he's taking us to the boat. And here's the important part here, guys and gals. The first key that I want you to recognize is this. If you want to build a greater followership, if you want to be a better leader, ask questions and ask better questions. In fact, what I always say is ask well-designed questions to accomplish an intended outcome. Now, in the context of being a real estate agent, it's asking well-designed questions to accomplish an intended outcome, meaning to get a real estate contract signed, whether it is a listing agreement or a buyer-broker agreement or a real estate purchase contract. But we should be asking great questions to cause people that we're asking to follow us to choose to ultimately follow us. That is the key to what happened in that interaction between Caroline and me and Anthony. I asked a ton of questions that gave him an opportunity to express himself, to express a little bit about who he is. And as a result, he felt great. And because of that, there was a level of comfort. And with that comfort, it permitted him to do for us what he wouldn't normally do. He was willing to go the extra mile with us and sacrifice some additional sales. So ask well-designed questions, guys and gals, that are intended to accomplish a specific outcome. And if you do that correctly, it will increase their level of comfort. And if they feel more comfortable, your clients or potential clients, what you're going to end up with is a lot more followers. In other words, a lot more customers who end up signing contracts and closing escrow. So remember, the first key is to ask well-designed questions. Within the context of whether it is a buyer-broker agreement or a listing agreement, I just want to share with you the question that I believe that you should be asking. I believe that fundamentally every listing, presentation, or conversation that you have should involve this question. and then modifying it just a bit, that in a buyer-broker agreement conversation or a conversation with buyers, you should be asking this modified question as well. So let's first of all start with the listing agreement or the listing presentation or conversation question. The first question is this: share with me what's caused you to decide to sell your home. What's happening next? It's a very basic question, but to me, it's a very fundamental one in the process of building rapport, building comfort between you and the client or potential client, so that they are willing to follow your lead through the process of choosing you to help them get to that next level in their personal journey, which is to sell a home and to move on to the next home, wherever they're moving to. So share with me what's caused you to decide to sell your home. What's happening next? See, that question fundamentally gives them an opportunity to share their story. And if you listen, if you truly listen to what they're saying and they know that you're listening, the level of comfort that they will have with you will go up exponentially. It's called building rapport. It's what I did with Anthony. I asked Anthony a bunch of questions, giving him an opportunity to express things about himself. And because of that, his level of comfort went up. The rapport that we had between us shot up exponentially. And therefore, he did things that he wouldn't ordinarily do. That's what I want for you as you go out and have conversations with your leads, with your prospects. Having great conversations so that they're converted from just leads or prospects to clients, people who are willing to follow your lead. So share with me what's caused you to decide to sell your home. What's happening next? Now, that's within the context of a listing conversation, talking to sellers. What would you ask if you were talking to buyers? Well, it's simple. You change it just very slightly. It's share with me what's caused you to decide to buy a home. What's happening next? Share with me what's caused you to decide to buy a home in this area. What's happening next? It's very simple. Again, it's just an opportunity for them to express themselves, to tell their story. Listen, everybody has a story to tell. If you give them an opportunity to share it, your chances of leading them, being selected as their leader, will go up exponentially. Let me share with you a story about that really proves that point within the context of real estate. This was probably about 8 years ago or so. Maybe, no, it's been longer than that, but maybe a decade ago. I went on a listing presentation to talk to this gal who was looking to sell her home, obviously. And I sat down with her and I asked her that question. It wasn't the first question I asked her, but it was probably the most important question. And I asked her, I said, Monique, share with me, what's caused you to decide to sell your home? What's happening next? And she said, well, I'm retiring. She said she was retiring from the Army. Well, she just said actually she was retiring. And this is the point that I want you to understand within this particular conversation. The key is to ask well-designed questions, right? But you can't just simply ask that question and then accept the answer and then move on with your agenda about telling them what you want to have happen next. The key to this conversation and this story that I'm sharing with you with Monique is that I dug deeper. Okay, just remember that. I dug deeper. Now just listen to this conversation. I said, so share with me what's caused you to decide to sell your home. What's happening next? She said, well, I'm retiring. I said, oh, you're retiring. What is it you do? She said, well, I'm actually in the Army. I said, you are? I said, well, what do you do? She said, well, I'm a major and I work in logistics. I said, that's cool. How long have you been doing it? She said, well, I'm 20 years. I'm at 20 years and I'm planning on retiring within the next 6 months. You can retire at 20 years and get a retirement, a pension. And I want to do that. I said, well, that's cool. I said, so share with me where you're planning on moving to. She said, well, I want to move to New Mexico, to the Red Rock area. And I said, okay, that's cool. What's taking you down there? And she said, well, I just love that area there. It's beautiful. And she said, I'm into pottery. And so she said, I want to just do pottery down there. I said, really? How long have you been into pottery? She said, well, since I was a teenager. I got into it when I was in junior high. I said, okay, that's cool. I said, so you want to move down to New Mexico in the Red Rock area and you want to do pottery? I said, so are you just going to do this as a hobby or are you looking to open up a studio? She said, well, I actually want to open up a studio. In fact, that's my plan. I'm going to open up a studio and I'm going to teach other people to do this thing that I love to do. And she could see my excitement in the fact that I love the fact that this woman was really clear about what she wanted and that she was realizing this dream, this thing that she wanted to do. And she could see my excitement for her. I expressed it, not only in my facial expressions, but also just simply the fact that I kept asking questions about it. I kept digging deeper. So we had this great conversation, and I expected to ask my next question. And that conversation, from the time we sat down to the time we finished up to that point, was about 15 minutes. And I was ready to ask my next question because I had this series of questions, like I always do, that I was going to ask. And she said, just time out for a second. And everything went from great. It was great. I was feeling this good vibe, that there was this rapport, things were great. And she got this very stern, very direct, abrupt, mentality and look on her face and in her voice. And then she did this, like, time out. Holy crap, what happened? We went from I was a hero to now I was a zero. Something was wrong. And I said, yeah, is there something wrong? And she looked at me and she said, let me tell you something. She said, I have interviewed 2 other agents up to this point, and neither one of them discovered or understands why it is that I'm selling my home. None of them discovered that I love to do pottery and that I'm moving down to New Mexico to open up a pottery studio. She said, you're the only one who discovered that, who understands that. She said, so I have a question for you. She said, would you be willing, would you do me a favor? And I remember she said that. She said, would you do me a favor? She said, would you be willing to list my home for me? Now, guys and gals, I swear to you, that was the conversation. She said, would you do me a favor? Would you be willing to list my home for me and sell it? I looked at my watch and said, I don't know, I'm kind of busy. I just want you to think about that. How many times have you had somebody approach you and say, after the conversation or during the conversation, would you do me a favor? Would you list my home for me and help me sell it? Now, this woman, Monique, a major in the Army, had this feeling of absolute gratitude and a sense of safety and security, and wanted me to do her a favor. She was looking at it as if I was doing her a favor by listing her home, because she finally found somebody who actually cared, who listened to her, who met her number one need as a human being, which is validation, which is recognition. How did that happen? Well, it goes back to the first key, which was to ask well-designed questions to accomplish a specific outcome, which is to build rapport through discovery, giving them a chance to express their story. And when that happens, that they're going to be willing to take that action, whatever it is, setting an appointment or signing a contract, right? Which Monique was willing to do. And then the second thing is that I not only asked that question, that first question, which is, share with me what caused you to decide to sell your home, what's happening next. I asked a bunch of follow-up questions. In other words, I dug deeper. See, everyone has a story to tell. And I just simply gave Monique and I gave Anthony in New York an opportunity to tell their story by asking questions and following up with those answers that they gave. See, and you all know how to do this. You do this with your family and friends. If you had a family member or a friend that you were really close with, and they said that they were going to move, your first question wouldn't be, could I sell your home for you? That is not the question you would ask. What you would ask is, you're moving, where are you moving to? Why are you moving? When are you moving? So you would ask a lot of questions. In other words, you would dig deeper to understand more about what's happening and give them a chance to express themselves. That's what you do with people where you have rapport. Well, in order to build rapport with strangers, your potential clients, these leads, these prospects, you're going to have to ask well-designed questions and ask a lot of them. And I don't have to give you the follow-up questions, because if you just simply listen to what they have to say, you'll know which questions to ask next. When you ask somebody, share with me what's causing you to decide to sell your home, what's happening next, and they say, I'm moving to New Mexico. The obvious question is, great, have you ever lived in New Mexico before? Or what's taking you to New Mexico? Well, I'm retiring there. Oh, great, you're retiring. What are you retiring from? Well, I was in the Army. I'm in the Army. Great. How long have you been in the Army? I've been in the Army for 20 years. Well, what do you do in the Army? Where I'm in logistics. Do you see that that's all very normal stuff that you know how to do? The problem is when we get into real estate and we start thinking about listing presentations or a buyer broker presentation, we think that we have to somehow turn into this robot, this mindless robot who has a script that they have to follow, and we just stick to the script. Now, I'm not here to tell you that you shouldn't have a script, because you should. But the script really is just the questions that we would logically ask anyway in a normal conversation. Because every one of those questions were just very normal questions that I would ask in any conversation, whether I was looking to sell someone's home or not. In other words, I'm just having a conversation, a normal conversation with another human being, which is one of the most important points that I can make this morning in this conversation that you and I are having, that we are having. Get out of your brain that it is a presentation. It is not a presentation. There are no slides. There's no PowerPoint. It's not what this is. It is a conversation. And great conversationalists just ask a lot of questions, and they listen. And because they listen, they know which questions to ask next. You don't need to be handed a script to know which questions to ask next if you just simply listen to what people have to say. You see, that's what great leaders do. They ask great questions, they allow people to express themselves, and they let people know that they listen. And when that happens, you build rapport, you build comfort, and as a result, they're willing to follow you when you ask them to follow you. And really, isn't that what this is all about? Really earning the right, building up enough credit, so to speak, to close them, to say, are you ready to follow me? And sometimes the conversation goes so well that you don't even have to ask that they're the ones who say, would you do me a favor and help me sell my home or help me find a home? So we talk about the second key, which is to dig deeper. Everyone has a story, guys and gals. Tell me more about that. It's one of the great questions you can ask. So you're moving to New Mexico. Tell me more about that. What's taking you to New Mexico? It's a great lead-in. Tell me more about that. Like this mentality of, I really want to know. I really want to know. Tell me more about that. What's taking you to New Mexico? Or is there anything else? You know, you find out about some of what they're interested in or what's going on in their life. How about just simply asking this question? Is there anything else that's happening that's causing you to decide to sell your home or to buy a home? Giving them an opportunity to continue to express themselves. Now, that's the first well-designed question that we could ask. Share with me what's caused you to decide to sell your home. There's another question that I believe that is very important within the context of listing somebody's home, the potential of you being chosen by them to sell their home. It's this question. Look, for example, if I were talking to Monique, I would say to Monique, now look, I know you want to sell your home, Monique, and thank you so much for asking me to be the agent to help you do that. I mean, that's obviously why I'm here. But what I'm really interested in is understanding, what is it that you expect me to do? What things do you expect me to do in order to get your home sold? Now, that question, guys and gals, is really about their expectations about what they believe you should do to get their home sold. This isn't about, well, I want you to list it at this price, and I want you to list it at this commission. I didn't ask that question. I didn't say, what has to happen? I'm asking, what would you expect that I should do as an agent to actually get your home sold? What are the things that you think are effective in getting the home sold? That's the question I'm asking. See, I know you want to sell your home, Monique. I mean, that's why I'm here. But what I'm really interested in is understanding what things you believe that I should do in order to get your home sold. Why is that important? Here's why it's important. Every relationship that you're in, guys and gals, is about expectations. I want you to think about any of your important relationships that you're in currently, whether it's an intimate relationship, a relationship with a kid, or a relationship with a friend or a neighbor. It always comes down to expectations. In every relationship, there is a set of expectations. You have expectations and they have expectations. When expectations are not discovered and therefore not met, the relationship does not go well. See, if the expectations are up here and the performance in the relationship is down here, you see that gap? In an intimate relationship, you know what that gap is called? It's called divorce. That's what it is. When expectations are up here and the performance by those who are in the relationship is down here, that gap leads to all sorts of anxiety, all sorts of frustration, all sorts of anger, all sorts of disappointment, all sorts of sadness, and that leads to the destruction of the relationship. So if we want to build a great relationship and maintain a great relationship, we have to discover expectations. Wouldn't it be important to at least find out from that potential customer, that potential seller you're asking to follow you, or you're going to ask to follow you at the end of the conversation, to really understand what their ideas are, what they believe you should be doing, even if they're the wrong ideas, even if they said, I want you to stand on the corner in a monkey suit and show the world that way that my home's on the market, right? But at least isn't it important to hear what they have to say? Because again, the number one human need is validation or recognition. People want to be what? They want to be heard. They want to be listened to. So I just simply like to ask those questions. Share with me what's caused you to decide to sell your home, what's happening next, and dig deeper in that conversation. And I follow that up once we've had that conversation, it's just simply asking the question, share with me, what are the things that you expect me to do in order to get your home sold? What do you believe I should be doing to get your home sold? And then listen to what they have to say. Now, sometimes they'll say, I don't know, you're the expert, in which case you need to say, I get that and thank you. And the good news is my company will sell nearly 10,000 homes this year. And since you only have one to sell, I know we can sell your home. However, what I know is this, that every relationship comes down to expectations. And because you have expectations, I want to understand what those are so I meet your expectations. Because Mr. and Mrs. Seller, if I don't meet your expectations, how are you going to feel about me? You're going to feel happy or angry? I'm going to feel angry. You're going to feel satisfied or dissatisfied? We're going to feel dissatisfied. Great. So share with me, what are the things that you believe I should be doing to get your home sold? How about this? Is communication important to you? See, what I did is I asked a leading question. I didn't say, well, communication is important to you. Let me tell you why and what I do. I'm just simply going to ask the question, share with me, do you believe that communication is important? Is that important to you? And they're either going to say yes or no. And in most cases, the obvious answer is they're going to say, yes, it is important to me. Then I'm going to follow that up with digging deeper. I'm going to say, great, tell me more about that. Tell me more about that. When you say communication is important, what do you mean it's important? How is it important to you? Why would it be important to you? What does it need to look like? How would we have to structure our interaction so that it's meeting your expectations? Do you like to be communicated through telephone, through text, through email? What are the ways in which you would like to be communicated with? In other words, I'm just simply digging deeper. Okay, guys and gals, we're out of time. Let me summarize this for you, what we've really talked about. Number one, you are a leader. I want you to recognize that. And great leaders have great followers. The more followers you have, it's a better indication of the quality of leader that you are. So if you don't have a lot of followers right now in the business of real estate, just simply recognize you have to do a better job of being a leader. And what's the number one thing you can do to become a better leader is to ask better questions, ask more questions. Recognize that the number one human need is validation. So the more questions you ask and give people an opportunity to express themselves, and you listen, you let them know that you've listened through your facial expressions, through the additional questions that you ask, the better they're going to feel about you. The better the leader you are, the more followers or clients you will have. Remember that first key we talked about, which is we've got to build a connection or rapport. We do that through asking questions, and then we dig deeper. And then the final thing is that really all of this is about discovering who they are and what their expectations are. Don't assume that you know what their expectations are. This just isn't simply about them saying, I need to get my home sold. Yeah, I get that, right? We know that. But don't assume you know everything about what it is they're trying to accomplish, as I didn't with Monique, right? I didn't just assume it was about getting a home sold, so she'd go buy another one. There was a much deeper story there. And then as it relates to what they expect, understand what it is they expect. They may have had previous experiences with other agents where it was horrible, that the agent didn't communicate, or they were horrible in terms of their marketing and what they did there. They weren't a proactive prospector. They didn't go out and do their job. Or maybe the agent was great at what they did, but the agent's no longer in the market, and so they couldn't work with them. So they're looking for another agent who would do a great job. You want to find out what that agent did that they believe was great that would cause them to choose that agent again. So just really discovering their expectations, because that's really the answer to the test. You know, when you're sitting there with them, whether it's a buyer or seller, it's a test. They're interviewing you. And the answers they have, if you'll just simply pull those answers out of them by asking questions, you'll have every answer that you need to pass the test, because the seller or the buyer, they have the answers. It's your job just simply to lead them through a great conversation, asking well-designed questions to get them to that intended outcome, which is to then close them, to say, okay, are you ready to get started? So that I can help you get your home on the market and get you down to New Mexico so you can open up that pottery studio. So hopefully this has been helpful, guys and gals. Don't complicate this. It is not complicated. This is not a complicated business. We just tend to make it complicated. You all know how to have great conversations. Now go out there within the context of this framework of those two primary questions and have those great conversations. And oh, by the way, yes, I did tip Anthony. I tipped him very well. So I think that people need to be recognized for the great work that they did. And Anthony did get a cash tip for what he did. I saw somebody ask that question. So, all right, guys and gals, let's finish this up with some closing affirmations and go out there and have a phenomenal day.